Good morning and welcome to Daily Briefing. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sarah. July 9th, 2026.
Today, we are tracking a dangerous escalation in the Middle East following retaliatory airstrikes, a major policy shift on high-skilled U.S. visas, and the launch of a revolutionary once-weekly insulin in India. Plus, if you're listening from Parker, Colorado, expect partly cloudy skies today with a current temperature of 60 degrees, heading up to a high of 90.
That is a hot one in Colorado, and things are heating up globally too, so let's get into it.
Let's start with the deteriorating security situation in the Middle East. Overnight, we saw a heavy exchange of military strikes between United States and Iranian forces, which has now been followed by massive crowds gathering in Iran for the burial of a prominent Ayatollah who was killed.
This feels like we are stepping right up to the edge of a direct regional conflict. The retaliatory nature of these strikes suggests neither side is willing to back down. Alex, what are the details on the strikes themselves?
The Pentagon confirmed that U.S. jets targeted several facilities used by Iran's Revolutionary Guard, which they say was a direct response to recent drone attacks on U.S. personnel. Iran immediately fired back with a barrage of missiles targeting bases housing coalition forces.
And now, with the public mourning of this high-ranking Ayatollah, the domestic pressure on the Iranian leadership to escalate even further must be immense. You do not get crowds of that size without a massive wave of public anger.
Exactly, and that public anger is being channeled directly by the hardliners in Tehran. It makes diplomatic back channels incredibly difficult to navigate when both administrations are facing intense domestic pressure to show strength.
We have been talking about the risk of a wider proxy war for months, but this direct, overt exchange of fire between Washington and Tehran changes the calculus completely. It is a very dangerous moment.
It really is. Meanwhile, on another global front, Russia has announced a complete halt to its diesel exports. This comes directly after a series of highly targeted Ukrainian drone strikes on major Russian domestic oil refineries.
Wow, that is a massive blow to the global energy market. Russia is one of the world's largest suppliers of diesel, so cutting off exports is going to send shockwaves through fuel markets, especially in Europe.
It absolutely will. Ukraine has spent weeks focusing its long-range drone program on Russia's energy infrastructure, and it looks like they have successfully disrupted their refining capacity to the point where Russia has to prioritize its own domestic supply.
So, by knocking out the refineries, Ukraine has forced Russia's hand. They cannot export what they cannot refine, and they need to keep their own military and agricultural sectors fueled.
That is the strategy. Analysts are already warning that global diesel inventories were already tight, so this sudden halt is likely to drive up prices at the pump globally, including in the U.S., very quickly.
It is a stark reminder of how directly this war impacts global consumer prices. Speaking of the war, the geopolitical tension is spilling over into the sports world again, specifically at Wimbledon. A Ukrainian semi-finalist has strongly condemned the International Olympic Committee's ruling on Russian athletes.
Yes, she did not hold back. After her quarterfinal victory, she used her press conference to criticize the decision to allow Russian and Belarusian athletes to compete in international events, even under a neutral flag. She said the goal should be to beat every single Russian, both on the court and by banning them from global sports entirely.
You can understand the immense frustration and pain driving those comments. When your home country is being bombed daily, seeing athletes from the aggressor nation on the global stage, even without their flag, feels like a betrayal.
It does, and it highlights how impossible it is to separate sports from global politics right now. The International Olympic Committee has tried to walk a fine line, but their compromise seems to have pleased no one.
And that tension is only going to build as we get closer to the next Olympic Games. Now, turning to a major health crisis, there is worrying news from the Democratic Republic of Congo. A suspected Ebola case has been reported in a brand new province, just as the official death toll from the current outbreak has reached 600.
This is a very concerning development. The virus spreading to a new region means the containment zones that health workers have spent months establishing are no longer enough to hold it back.
That is the nightmare scenario for epidemiologists. Once Ebola hitches a ride across provincial borders, tracking contacts becomes exponentially harder, especially in areas with limited health infrastructure or ongoing security conflicts.
Right, and the World Health Organization is already warning that resources are stretched thin. If this suspected case is confirmed, they will have to deploy entirely new response teams to a region that might not be prepared for the strict isolation protocols required.
600 deaths is already a devastating toll, and if this represents a new wave of geographic spread, that number could climb rapidly. We will keep a close eye on the lab confirmation of that case.
Coming up, we will look at some massive policy changes coming to U.S. visas that could affect thousands of international professionals.
Let's move over to India, where some major regulatory and technological shifts are happening. First, the United States is set to implement much stricter rules for H-1B visas and green cards starting this August. This is expected to create some really significant hurdles for Indian IT professionals.
This is going to be a massive disruption for the tech sector. The new rules are designed to tighten eligibility requirements and increase the minimum salary threshold for high-skilled foreign workers.
Which means companies will find it much more expensive and bureaucratically difficult to sponsor foreign talent. For the hundreds of thousands of Indian engineers who look to the U.S. for career growth, this is a major roadblock.
It really is, and we might see a shift where global tech firms start expanding their engineering hubs within India itself rather than importing that talent to Silicon Valley.
That would certainly accelerate a trend we are already seeing. On the medical front, though, there is some incredible news out of India. The world's first and only once-weekly insulin, called a weekly, has officially launched there for adults with type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
This is a massive breakthrough. Right now, many diabetics have to inject insulin once or even multiple times a day. Moving that to just one injection a week is going to completely change their quality of life.
Think about the compliance aspect, too. It is so much easier to stay on track with your treatment when you only have to think about it once a week instead of daily. This is a game changer for diabetes management in India, which has one of the highest diabetic populations in the world.
It really is a huge step forward for public health. And finally, in Indian tech news, the aerospace startup Skyroot is preparing for its very first orbital launch attempt of their Vikram 1 rocket.
If they pull this off, it will be a historic moment. Skyroot is trying to establish itself as a major private player in the global small satellite launch market.
Exactly. They're aiming to do what SpaceX did in the US, but tailored for the rapidly growing small sat market. A successful orbital flight would put India's private space sector firmly on the global map.
Let's talk markets and finance now. There is some major news at the intersection of traditional entertainment, banking, and digital assets. Sony's U.S. subsidiary, Connexia Trust, has secured preliminary conditional approval from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency to establish a dollar-denominated stablecoin business.
This is a fascinating move, Sarah. Sony is backing this venture with $40 million in capital. It is one of the clearest signs yet of a massive, traditional consumer tech and entertainment giant stepping directly into the regulated digital asset space.
It makes you wonder what their long-term play is. Sony has an enormous global ecosystem of gaming, music, and movies. Are they planning to integrate this stablecoin into the PlayStation Network or their digital storefronts?
That seems to be the speculation. If you can use a regulated, Sony-backed stablecoin for in-game purchases or digital media across their entire global network, you bypass a lot of traditional payment processing fees. But the key word here is regulated. Getting approval from the OCC is no small feat.
No, it is not. The OCC is notoriously strict, which is why the approval is conditional. Sony will have to meet very rigorous compliance and risk management standards before they can actually launch. It shows they are trying to do this the right way, within the regulatory system.
Absolutely. And they're not the only ones trying to bridge the gap between traditional finance and blockchain. Swift has launched a new blockchain ledger to host a tokenized deposit pilot involving 17 major global banks, including giants like HSBC and Citi.
This is a huge deal for the banking industry. SWIFT is the backbone of global cross-border payments, and by using distributed ledger technology, they are trying to enable 24/7 real-time international transfers.
Right, because currently cross-border banking is slow and expensive, often taking days because of different time zones and clearing systems. This pilot aims to use tokenized deposits to settle transactions almost instantly, any time of day.
It is basically bringing the speed of crypto to the safety and scale of the traditional banking system. If 17 of the world's biggest banks are testing this, it means tokenization is moving from a niche tech concept to mainstream financial infrastructure.
It really is. But while traditional finance is adopting blockchain technology, some of the biggest tech investors are actually backing away from cryptocurrency itself. Singapore's state-owned wealth fund, Temasek, has announced it will pivot away from crypto investments to focus heavily on artificial intelligence.
That is a major shift in strategy. Temasek was historically quite active in the digital asset space, but they took a massive $275 million hit when the crypto exchange FTX collapsed. It looks like that left a lasting scar.
It definitely did. They are redirecting their capital toward AI, with plans to increase their AI portfolio allocation to 15% by 2031. They are clearly betting that AI is a much more stable and productive engine for long-term growth.
And they're not alone. There is a broader trend of institutional capital shifting from crypto to AI. In fact, we are seeing some blockbuster AI initial public offerings on the horizon that could leave crypto even further behind in the fight for investor dollars.
Yes, the biggest one everyone is talking about is the South Korean chip maker SK Hynix, which is planning a massive $24.5 billion US debut for its AI-focused chip business.
$24.5 billion. That is an astronomical number. It shows just how hungry public market investors are for pure-play AI infrastructure companies. If you are an institutional fund, you're going to allocate your tech budget to a giant like SK Hynix rather than speculative digital tokens.
Exactly. The liquidity is moving toward physical AI hardware and software services. Even crypto-native venture capital firms are feeling the pull. Paradigm, which has historically been a pure-play crypto VC, has just launched a new $1.2 billion fund targeting artificial intelligence and robotic startups.
Wow, even Paradigm is diversifying. Though, to be fair, they did release a statement saying they remain fully committed to their core crypto investment strategy. But money talks, and raising over $1 billion for AI and robotics shows where they see the immediate high-growth opportunities.
Is a smart hedge. The boundaries between advanced cryptography, decentralized networks, and AI agents are starting to blur anyway, so investing in both makes a lot of sense.
When we come back, we will dive into the tech sector, including a major new release from OpenAI and a landmark right-to-repair settlement.
On the tech side, we have some critical security updates that Windows users need to pay attention to. Microsoft has patched a severe privilege escalation vulnerability in its malware protection engine, known as CV 2026-5656 or Rogue Planet.
Rogue Planet. That sounds like a sci-fi movie, but the threat is very real. If an attacker exploits this, they can gain system-level privileges on a Windows machine. That is basically the highest level of administrative control, right?
Yes, it bypasses almost all local security controls. The irony here is that the flaw was in the malware protection engine itself, the very tool meant to keep you safe. Microsoft has pushed out an automatic patch, so users need to make sure their systems are updated immediately.
And that is not the only security warning. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, has added 4 actively exploited vulnerabilities affecting Adobe, Joomla, and Langflow to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog.
This is important because once CISA adds flaws to this list, federal agencies are legally required to patch them within a strict time frame, and private companies usually follow suit. These vulnerabilities can allow remote code execution, which is the worst-case scenario for system administrators.
LangFlow is on that list too, which is interesting because it is a tool used for building AI applications. It shows that as AI development tools become more popular, hackers are actively targeting them to find backdoors into corporate networks.
Absolutely, the attack surface is shifting. But speaking of AI, OpenAI has just launched something very cool. They have released their new GPT-Live voice models, which are capable of listening and speaking simultaneously.
Wait, so it can interrupt you, and you can interrupt it just like a real human conversation?
Yes, exactly. Traditional voice assistants require you to speak, wait for the audio to process, and then listen to a generated response. GPT-Live does all of this in real time, handling natural speech patterns, hesitations, and interruptions seamlessly.
That is going to make voice interactions feel so much less robotic. It is a massive step toward truly natural conversational AI. I can see this being incredibly useful for real-time translation or interactive learning.
It really changes the dynamic. And OpenAI isn't the only one pushing the boundaries of AI capabilities. SpaceX AI has just launched Grok 4.5, which they say is their most advanced model yet.
Grok 4.5 is specifically optimized for coding, agentic workflows, and scientific research. What is really interesting is that they trained it alongside Cursor, the popular AI code editor.
That integration is key. By training the model in tandem with the developer environment, they have optimized it to understand the context of massive code bases. It is designed to act more like an autonomous engineering partner rather than just a code generator.
That is the direction the industry is moving. We are transitioning from simple chatbots to agentic systems that can actually execute complex, multi-step workflows for you.
It is an exciting time for software development, but let's shift to a victory for physical hardware owners. John Deere has agreed to a landmark settlement with the Federal Trade Commission that will finally grant equipment owners the right to repair their own agricultural machinery.
This is a massive win for the right to repair movement. For years, farmers have been locked out of repairing their own tractors because of proprietary software locks. If a sensor broke, they had to wait days for an authorized technician to show up with a laptop just to plug it in and reset the system.
Right, which can be devastating during harvest season when every hour counts. Under this settlement, John Deere has to provide farmers and independent repair shops with the same diagnostic tools, software, and manuals that their authorized dealers use.
It sets a huge precedent. If farmers can win the right to repair complex, software-heavy tractors, it paves the way for consumers to demand the same rights for their smartphones, laptops, and home appliances.
It definitely shifts the power balance back to the consumer. Now, let's look at some controversial policy news from Europe. The European Parliament has officially greenlit Chat Control 1.0, a legislation that has drawn fierce criticism from privacy advocates.
Yes, Patrick Breyer, a prominent privacy advocate, came out with a very strong statement saying our children lose out under this law. The legislation is aimed at combating child abuse material online, but critics argue it essentially mandates mass surveillance of private messages.
The core of the controversy is that it requires platforms to scan encrypted messaging services for flagged content. Privacy experts argue that you cannot do this without breaking end-to-end encryption, which compromises the digital privacy of every single citizen.
It is the classic, difficult trade-off between security and privacy. But many feel this goes too far, creating a backdoor that could easily be exploited by bad actors or authoritarian governments.
It is going to face legal challenges without a doubt. But let's end this segment on an incredible scientific discovery. NASA's Curiosity rover, exploring the Gale crater on Mars, has identified 21 carbon-based organic molecules in a 3.5 billion-year-old clay-rich rock.
Wow. 3.5 billion years old. And these are organic molecules?
Yes, and specifically, they found a nitrogen-bearing ring structure. That is incredibly significant because that kind of chemistry is directly linked to the processes that can precede the formation of RNA and DNA.
So, this is not proof of past life, but it proves that ancient Martian sediment had the exact chemical building blocks necessary for life to start.
Exactly. It shows that ancient Mars was habitable, with the right ingredients in place. It is a stunning piece of the puzzle.
Coming up next, we will wrap things up with a look at the FIFA World Cup, some WNBA drama, and a tribute to a music legend.
Finally, let's turn to sports and culture. We have to start with some sad news from the music world. Bonnie Tyler, the legendary Welsh singer whose powerful, raspy voice gave us the iconic anthem Total Eclipse of the Heart, has passed away at the age of 75.
Oh, that is a huge loss. Total Eclipse of the Heart is one of those timeless, epic tracks that absolutely everyone knows. She had such a unique, powerful voice that defined an entire era of pop rock.
She really did. That song spent weeks at #1 all over the world and remains a staple of radio and karaoke to this day. Her legacy as one of the most distinctive vocalists of her generation is firmly secure.
Absolutely. Turning to sports, the FIFA World Cup 2026 is reaching its climax, and Al Jazeera has done a fascinating breakdown of the biggest takeaways from the round of 16.
The tactical shifts have been the most interesting part. We're seeing a real emphasis on high pressing, physical play, and some of the traditional powerhouse nations have really struggled against highly organized, defensive underdogs.
It has been a tournament of surprises for sure. And the entertainment lineup for the final is going to be massive. Justin Bieber has just been announced to join Madonna, BTS, and Shakira for the World Cup final halftime show.
That is an incredibly star-studded lineup. They are clearly trying to make this the biggest entertainment spectacle in sporting history, rivaling the Super Bowl halftime show on a global scale.
It is going to be a massive cultural event. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the WNBA is finding itself in the political spotlight. A group of lawmakers has sent a scathing letter to the league, pressing for accountability over what they describe as physical and verbal attacks on rookie star Caitlin Clark.
This is a very unusual intervention. The letter accuses the league of failing to protect Clark from unsportsmanlike play and targeted harassment, arguing that it could damage the growth of women's basketball.
It highlights just how much of a cultural and economic force Caitlin Clark has become. The intense scrutiny on her rookie season has transcended sports and entered the broader political and cultural conversation.
It really has. The WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growth, but with that comes a level of spotlight and controversy they have never had to navigate before.
It is going to be fascinating to see how the league responds to that kind of political pressure.
Today's stories remind us that whether in global energy, advanced technology, or professional sports, the rules of the game are being rewritten at an incredible pace.
They certainly are. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Take care, everyone.